Amy Parsons had spent years building a life in London. Originally from Melbourne, the 35-year-old had moved to the UK and established a successful career in the city. Friends described her as adventurous, intelligent, kind and grounded. She lived in Whitechapel with her fiancé, Roderick Deakin White, and from the outside their relationship looked settled. They had been together for around 8 years, appeared frequently in photographs together, and had even discussed marriage. Behind closed doors, however, Amy was becoming increasingly unhappy. Deakin White worked intermittently as a graphic designer and relied heavily on Amy's financial support. One source of tension was his interest in cross-dressing, something Amy had grown uncomfortable with, particularly because he often wanted to incorporate it into their intimate life. But that was only one part of a relationship that had begun to deteriorate. By early 2018, Amy had grown closer to a colleague named James Saunders. What started with coffees eventually developed into a romantic relationship. Amy began talking openly about leaving Deakin White and moving on. As she started pulling away, his behavior became increasingly controlling. He accessed her laptop, monitored her taxi account, and followed her home from work. In messages to friends, he agonized over the possibility of losing her and repeatedly asked what he could do to keep the relationship alive. Some of those messages were darker. To one person he wrote, "I hate her." In another message he said, "I'm going to do something stupid. I just know it." Amy, meanwhile, appeared to have made her decision. The night before her death, she stayed with James. They had already told each other that they loved one another, and Amy made clear that she intended to end her engagement. On the 25th of April 2018, Amy returned to the 5th floor flat that she shared with Deakin White in Whitechapel. Earlier that day, she had told a friend that she needed to resolve the situation. That evening, she began messaging James as the conversation with her fiancé unfolded. "I don't know how tonight is going to pan out," she wrote. "He's not accepting anything I say." Deakin White was promising changes and making what Amy described as grand gestures, trying to persuade her to stay. Her response was clear. She did not want the relationship to continue. She added that he was not backing off. At some point during the argument, Deakin White left the flat. Amy continued messaging James, and her final message to him was a heart emoji. At 8:13 p.m., Deakin White returned. Amy was in the shower. Near the front door was a metal exercise bar that was normally kept in the flat. As protection against a possible break-in, Deakin White picked it up and entered the bathroom. He then launched a sustained attack while Amy was standing in the bath beneath the shower. The force caused catastrophic injuries to her head and face. Deakin White later admitted that he had continued until he believed she was no longer alive. Then he left her there. Forensic evidence suggested Amy may have survived for more than 30 minutes after the attack, possibly close to an hour. Deakin White did not call an ambulance. Instead, he turned off the bathroom light, covered his clothing, set the burglar alarm, and locked the door behind him. He then disposed of their phones in the River Thames. During the period after the attack, he went to a man living on a houseboat and confessed that he had killed his fiancée. He also telephoned his father and described himself as a murderer. His father contacted emergency services and asked police to check on Amy. Officers eventually forced their way into the Whitechapel flat, where Amy was found in the bathroom. Her time on this earth had ended from a traumatic brain injury. Deakin White eventually handed himself in. There was never any dispute that he had caused Amy's death. The central argument became what he had intended when he entered the bathroom with the metal bar. He denied murder and claimed the killing had been an accident, or that he had lost control. The prosecution argued that this could not be separated from what had come before it. Amy was trying to leave. Deakin White had monitored her movements, followed her, interfered with her communications, and expressed increasing anger as he realized the relationship was ending. Detective Inspector Darren Jones later said Amy had begun taking steps towards a life free from Deakin White's controlling behavior, and that he could not accept she was moving on. A jury agreed. In November 2019, Roderick Deakin White was convicted of murder. At sentencing, Judge John Lafferty described Amy's death as a horrendous and brutal killing before reducing the case to its central point. Deakin White had decided that if he could not have Amy, nobody else would. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Amy's family were deeply disappointed by that minimum and said they intended to appeal it. Her sister Eve described Amy as the bright light of their family. What makes the case especially difficult is how clearly Amy had already begun moving towards another life. She had made the decision to leave, told friends, started another relationship, and returned home specifically to end the old one. In her final messages, the question was no longer whether Amy wanted to leave Roderick Deakin White. It was whether he was willing to accept that she had. In January 2016, 20-year-old Sophie Lyonnais left the French city of Troyes and moved to London to work as an au pair. For Sophie, the arrangement should have been a chance to become more independent, improve her English and gain experience working with children. Friends and relatives described her as shy, gentle, and particularly caring. She loved animals, wanted to work with children, and was not someone naturally inclined towards confrontation. Her new employers were Sabrina Koida and Wissem Medouni, a French couple living in Southfields, southwest London. At first, the arrangement appeared to work. Sophie looked after the children, made friends with other local nannies, and seemed happy enough when she spoke to her mother. Sabrina sometimes sat with her over cups of tea and even gave her a makeover. But inside the house on Wimbledon Park Road, something gradually changed. Sabrina had developed an extraordinary fixation on her former boyfriend Mark Walton, a founding member of Boyzone, who by then lived in Los Angeles and worked in the music industry. Their relationship had ended years earlier, but Sabrina continued making allegations against the pop star. She accused Walton of using black magic against her. She claimed he had arranged helicopters to fly above her house. On one occasion, she even accused him of seriously violating a cat, despite evidence being given at trial that she did not own one. Eventually, Sophie became incorporated into this belief system. Sabrina became convinced that her young au pair was secretly working with Walton. Sophie was accused of sleeping with him, spying on the family, and helping him enter the house so that its occupants could be drugged and seriously violated. There was one enormous problem. Sophie had never met Mark Walton. But inside the Southfields house, facts were becoming increasingly irrelevant. Medouni began participating in Sabrina's accusations. Prosecutors later described the couple as a truly toxic combination, with their shared suspicions, creating a closed world in which Sophie became responsible for events that had never happened. The interrogations became relentless. Hours of recordings recovered from their phones captured Sophie being questioned repeatedly about Walton. She was called a spy and a pedophile. She was threatened with prison, further violence and serious violation unless she admitted what the couple wanted to hear. At first, Sophie denied everything. Eventually, she began saying what they demanded. By then, people who encountered her locally had noticed a change. Michael Cromer, who ran a nearby fish and chip restaurant, remembered Sophie becoming increasingly withdrawn. Sometimes she appeared close to tears. On one occasion, she told him Sabrina had struck her because she had dropped some butter. Her mother, Catherine, also realized that something was wrong. By April 2017, Sophie was telling her family she wanted to return to France. Her mother bought her a plane ticket. Investigators would later be unable to find either that ticket or Sophie's passport inside the house. A recorded telephone conversation captured Catherine pleading for her daughter to come home. Sabrina refused to let the matter end, insisting Sophie first had to reveal where she had supposedly been with Walton. It became the last conversation Sophie ever had with her mother. During her final weeks, Sophie's condition deteriorated dramatically. Recordings showed her becoming increasingly thin, frightened, and quiet. For the final 12 days of her life, she was reportedly prevented from leaving the house. On the 18th of September 2017, the husband and wife recorded what they presented as a breakthrough. An exhausted Sophie finally appeared to confess to their accusations. Prosecutors argued that the words had no evidential value whatsoever. After months of intimidation, violence, and interrogation, Sophie was simply telling her captors what they demanded to hear. Within hours, though, tragically, she was dead. Exactly how her time on this earth ended could never be established because of what happened afterwards. Post-mortem examinations did reveal extensive injuries, including fractures to her jaw, sternum, and ribs. The possible causes of death included a serious head injury, choking, or drowning. Rather than call emergency services, Sabrina and Maduni began planning how to make Sophie disappear. They placed her remains in a suitcase and decided to burn them in the back garden. On the 20th of September, neighbors became concerned about a foul-smelling fire behind the house and contacted emergency services. Firefighters arrived to find the couple apparently behaving normally beside the flames, even cooking chicken nearby. Once the fire had been brought under control, firefighter Thomas Hunt began examining what remained. He saw what appeared to be human fingers and a nose. When Maduni was asked what they'd been burning, he claimed it was a sheep carcass bought at Wimbledon Market. It was not. Among the ashes were Sophie's clothing, jewellery, and human remains. The couple had intended to claim that their au pair had simply left their employment and returned to France. Instead, the fire designed to erase Sophie had drawn neighbours, firefighters, and eventually murder detectives directly to the house. Sabrina and Maduni admitted attempting to dispose of Sophie's remains, but each blamed the other for her death. The jury rejected them both. In May 2018, Sabrina Kouida and Wissam Maduni were convicted of murdering Sophie Lyonnais. Each received a life sentence with a minimum term of 30 years. At sentencing, the judge described the suffering inflicted on Sophie as prolonged and without pity. A truly bizarre case. By the evening of the 5th of June 2020, two very different stories were unfolding on opposite sides of London. In Wembley, 46-year-old Bieber Henry was celebrating her birthday. Lockdown restrictions meant there would be no crowded nights out. So Bieber, her younger sister Nicole Smallman, and a small group of friends gathered instead in Friant Country Park. Bieber was a social worker who worked with vulnerable children and families. Nicole, 27, was a freelance photographer. They were close sisters, and that evening was supposed to be nothing more complicated than food, drinks, and time together. Across London, 18-year-old Daniel Hussein had become absorbed in something completely different. For around 2 years, Hussein had been active on an occult-themed internet forum called Becoming a Living God. He consumed material about demons, rituals, and supernatural agreements, and had become particularly interested in the idea that a person could make a pact with an entity in exchange for wealth or power. Hussein did not treat this simply as entertainment. Inside his bedroom, he produced a handwritten contract addressed to a demon called Lucifuge Rofakal. Following instructions he had encountered online, Hussein signed the document using his own blood. His offer was extraordinary. He promised to sacrifice 6 women every 6 months in exchange for financial rewards, including winning the Mega Millions lottery jackpot. There was another handwritten agreement, offering a blood sacrifice to a different demon in exchange for making a female student fall in love with him. While Hussein was preparing these supposed agreements, Bieber and Nicole were enjoying the birthday celebration. As midnight passed, their friends gradually began leaving the park. The sisters were having such a good time that they decided to remain behind. They switched on colourful fairy lights, played music, and continued dancing together in the field. At 1:05 a.m., Nicole messaged her boyfriend Adam Stone to tell him what they were doing. Photographs taken minutes later captured the sisters playing with the lights. One of the final images was taken at approximately 1:13 a.m. In it, both women appeared to be looking towards something outside the photograph. Prosecutors later noted the detail, although exactly what had attracted their attention could never be established. But we can make a good guess as to what they were looking at. At almost exactly the same time, Hussein was inside the same park. His preparation had become increasingly physical. rather than just mental during the preceding days. He had purchased a set of kitchen knives, ordered a black balaclava and folding shovels, created an online lottery account, and continued researching the occult material that formed the basis of his supposed pact. At around 7:45 that evening, CCTV captured Hussein leaving his family home. He travelled to Edgware Road to collect a package containing the balaclava and shovels, before continuing towards Friant Country Park. The two separate stories were now moving towards the same patch of darkness. Bieber and Nicole were alone after their friends left. Hussein had entered the park, believing that taking the lives of women would fulfill his supernatural agreement and eventually make him wealthy. Sometime after the sisters' final photographs and before 2:30 a.m., their paths converged. Hussein attacked Bieber first and then Nicole. Both sisters suffered repeated injuries from a sharp implement. During the confrontation, however, Hussein also badly injured his own hand. That mistake would become crucial. CCTV later captured him leaving the park at around 4 a.m. His trousers were missing, his jacket was wrapped around his waist, and his injured right hand was concealed against his body. When he eventually sought hospital treatment, Hussein claimed that he had been mugged. Meanwhile, Bieber and Nicole simply disappeared. When they failed to return home, their family contacted police. They were told resources would be deployed, but the response later came under serious criticism. Ultimately, relatives and friends went searching themselves. On the 7th of June, Adam Stone and others returned to Friant Country Park. They found the sisters' sunglasses and then a blood-stained sharp implement lying in the grass. Adam was still speaking to police when he pushed through vegetation beneath a tree line and discovered Bieber and Nicole. The investigation now began moving back towards Hussein. DNA left at the scene eventually produced a familial match to his father. On the 1st of July, officers raided the family home in Eltham. Inside Hussein's bedroom, they discovered the world he had been constructing around himself. There was, of course, the balaclava and shovel, but also a latex glove, occult symbols, lottery tickets, and the handwritten demonic contract. 3 lottery tickets had actually been folded inside the document, and Hussein had apparently expected the agreement to work. During the 10 days following the sisters' deaths, he spent more than £160, or around $200, on lottery tickets and online bets. Hilariously though, he won nothing. So he really was a loser in many definitions of the word. His own injury, CCTV movements, purchases and DNA instead created an extensive evidential trail. In July 2021, a jury found Daniel Hussein guilty of both murders. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 35 years. Investigators believed his injured hand may have prevented the story from continuing. Because remember, the pact found in his bedroom did not describe 2 victims. It described an intention to sacrifice 6 women every 6 months. Anna Jedkariak was born in Poland. She was known to her friends as Anya. She was a smart, tenacious and ambitious girl. She had a passion for traveling, with dreams of learning Japanese and living there one day. Growing up, she always knew that she wanted to live abroad. She was also a talented musician. She could play the guitar and the keyboard, and her friends always said that she had a beautiful singing voice. But not that she believed them. That was one of her best qualities. She didn't know just how good she was. She moved to Britain to study in 2020, getting a place on a sound engineering course at the University of West London. English wasn't her first language, but that wasn't going to stop her. She knew that she could excel. And quickly, there she was, excelling. She was doing well on the course. She had a new part-time job that she loved, and her social life was thriving. Everything was looking up for brave Anya. On the 16th of May 2022 at around 11:30 p.m, Anya finished her shift at Las Iguanas, a restaurant in Ealing. This was a new job for her, but one that she was loving. She was a bartender and it gave her a chance to chat to the customers. It was a non-eventful evening and she'd been on shift with Jack, a new romantic interest in her life. He also worked at the Mexican restaurant, and while it was early days, Both are excited about where the relationship was going. Sometimes you just know you've got a good thing. Anya had recently gone through a breakup, and everyone felt like she was finally in a great place. So Anya and Jack left the Ealing restaurant just before midnight, and they began the walk back to Anya's home. It was quite a short walk, maybe half an hour, and it was a nice evening too. The two laughed and joked as they walked along, happy in each other's company. But they had no idea what lay ahead of them. They turned into Robert's Alley off of Church Gardens shortly after midnight. Little did they know they were being followed. Under the cover of darkness, a hooded figure grabbed Anya from behind. He was wearing a mask, and he was seemingly undeterred by Jack's presence as he jabbed at her multiple times, catching her in the neck with a sharp kitchen implement. Jack could do little to stop the violent aggressor. He ran to get help as the assailant ferociously plunged the implement into Anya. Anya fought as hard as she could, but there was little that she could do. She was almost helpless against the overbearing figure. The 21-year-old student was caught 40 times in the head and neck. The attacker was disturbingly trying to remove her head. Police and paramedics arrived less than 10 minutes later, but it was already far too late. Anya Jedkawiak was pronounced dead at the scene. The killer left a blood trail from the scene, leading officers to a pond in Gunnersbury Park. There they found a murder weapon, and a picture of Anya and a mystery man. This mystery man was Dennis Akpomde. Anya met Dennis on an online dating site shortly after she moved to Britain to study in 2020. They dated for around a year, but cracks in the relationship began to show. Dennis was violent and aggressive, and Anya was scared of him. She attempted to end the relationship, but he refused. He didn't want to believe it was over, but Anya stood her ground. She was moving away to London to start her studies, and she simply wanted a clean break. When she did this, he said to her, "We will be together no matter what. I will find you." He also told her that he would end his own life. She was concerned about his threats to himself and contacted the police, who carried out welfare checks on him. But they found him safe and well, his threats empty, merely emotional manipulation, nothing more than a ploy to scare her into staying with him. Detectives were quickly able to build a picture of Dennis's movements using CCTV. The investigation was led by the Met Specialist Crime Command, and a combination of CCTV and urgent inquiries allowed them to piece together his movements post-attack. He was located and arrested at Victoria Coach Station less than 22 hours after the attack. The CCTV also helped them piece together exactly what had happened. Dennis arrived in London, Victoria from his home in Newport by coach at 6:30 p.m. on the 15th of May. As soon as he got to London, he travelled by tube to Ealing, arriving around an hour later. From there, he set out to track down Anya. He went straight to the restaurant where she worked, but at that time, she wasn't on shift. On CCTV, Dennis can be seen pacing back and forth outside of the restaurant with his hood up and his face covered by a scarf or mask. That same evening, detectives were able to show via telephone records that Dennis had connected to telephone masts in the vicinity of Anya's address, suggesting that he went from the restaurant to her home in Sterling Place, W5. He then spent much of the following hours riding buses in the Ealing area. The following day, Monday the 16th of May, Anya arrived for her shift just before 5 p.m. Dennis got to Ealing Broadway Station around an hour later. At 8 p.m, he bought a knife for $4.99 from a local shop on New Broadway and was captured on CCTV, again pacing back and forth in the area near Anya's work. And as we know, she left with Jack just before midnight. But what they didn't know is they were being followed closely by Dennis. As the couple entered an alleyway, Dennis struck and the attack took place. A post-mortem examination confirmed that Anya died from multiple injuries, around 40. This wasn't a simple attack in the heat of the moment, this was a premeditated and drawn-out rage. After fleeing, Dennis dumped the sharp instrument in Round Pond in Gunnersbury Park. Also found in the pond were items including 2 mobile phones belonging to Anya and Dennis, and a photo frame with a picture of them together. Hours later, shortly before 6 a.m. on Tuesday the 17th of May, CCTV caught Dennis approaching an ambulance driver who had stopped at a petrol garage close to Gunnersbury Park. He asked for help with an open wound on his fingers, a wound which he said had been caused by a pit bull dog. Dennis was referred that day to a hospital in London, where this time he bizarrely claimed that he was a sword swallower, and that he had simply cut his hand whilst practicing. I'm sorry, but have you ever heard an excuse like this before? I mean, yeah. Then Dennis travelled by bus, but CCTV showed him without his black rucksack, a rucksack that he'd been carrying prior to the attack. This was later recovered by TfL's Lost Property Department. Inside the bag was the receipt for the murder weapon. Dennis refused to speak to officers during interrogations, but he didn't need to. The evidence here spoke for itself. Dennis Akpomde was charged with Anya's murder on Wednesday the 18th of May 2022. On Thursday the 25th of May 2022, Dennis went on trial at Kingston Crown Court. Despite pleading not guilty, he refused to attend his own trial. So the 9-day trial took place in his absence. While he remained in his cell, the jurors and Anya's closest friends and family had to listen to the ins and outs of what led to her death. The jurors learned that, unable to accept the end of the relationship, Dennis began trying to manipulate Anya. What began with threats of doing harm to himself ended with threats of harming her. One text read, "We will be together no matter what. I will find you." On the 9th of May, he also left a voice note on the Stereo app which said, "Find her, kill her, stab her, monster." He was a man who was heavily in debt, without a job and unable to accept the end of the relationship. He was living in squalor with maggots found in his bathroom. So yeah, why would Anya not want to be with him? A real mystery. In the days before her demise, Dennis changed his telephone number. He travelled to London, purchased different clothing and the murder weapon. He stalked Anya at her home address and workplace, and he organised a hookup on the dating site Grindr. But he never got that far. He laid in wait for Anya to finish her shift at Las Iguanas, before following her into Roberts Alley and launching the violent, ferocious attack. In a victim impact statement, Anya's mum said, "Shock and anger flooded my heart at the realisation that someone, in fact someone she knew and was close to, had murdered her in such a barbaric way. Not only did I lose a part of myself, I lost my will to live. The world is no longer as joyful and as colourful now that my Anya isn't here." Telling the court that he now suffers from PTSD as a result of the incident, Jack said, "They say that no one deserves to die, but Anya deserved to live. She deserved to be happy, to have the career she dreamed of, and to be an aunt. I hope in the last few weeks and hours of her life that we spent together made her happy. I will always be grateful that Anya was a part of my life. Her life may have been taken from her, but her spirit and memory will always be with us." Throughout proceedings, Dennis refused to answer officers' questions or attend court for his trial. With no real defence, his lawyer said, "It is both truly tragic and awful that a relationship so full of hope and love could have come to this. Her life was to be ended by the defendant's acts of rejection and jealousy. It seems the defendant never came to terms with Ms. Jadkariak's ending their relationship, which ironically, whilst it lasted, was the best thing that ever happened to him." On Wednesday, the 31st of May 2022, Dennis was sentenced at Kingston Crown Court. Judge Rajiv Shetty said the attack was ferocious and savage. There is no mitigation here. There is no evidence of a mental disorder or disability, he said. He noted that Dennis had shown no signs of remorse and that he had engaged in significant planning in murdering Anya, describing her as a joyful, intelligent, ambitious, tenacious and talented student. He added that the attack would have been horrifying to both Anya and Jack, who was powerless to help. Dennis was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 29 years.
Parked my car up and then the van come up behind me, flashed me. They all jumped out and then they took this girl. They said, you've done good, and I don't know whether my family's going to be alright still, but they threatened to take my family away from me. So at that point, I'm doing what I can to protect my family.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome back to Case Documentaries. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories and other things that you may later regret knowing, with regular uploads every week. Please do join the quickly growing, incredibly supportive Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Let's get straight into today's Dark Case. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved Sarah and all those affected by this case. Sarah Everard was born on the 14th of June 1987 at Redhill Hospital in Surrey. It wasn't far from the 1930s three-bedroom semi-detached home in Hawley, where her parents lived with her siblings James and Katie. Her mother Sue was a physiotherapist and her father Jeremy was one of the nation's most brilliant engineers. He was an expert in microwaves and low-noise oscillators. After gaining a PhD from Cambridge in 1983, he went on to teach at King's College, London. When Sarah was 6, he was made a professor of electronics at the University of York, and the family moved north to a new home in the city. Here, Sarah had a great childhood. She was bright and beautiful. Even as a child, she always put others first and had an amazing sense of humour. Her quick wit made it easy for her to make new friends. After finishing school in 2005, Sarah went on to study geography at Durham, but this was never her passion. Her warm, sociable personality made her a perfect fit for a career in marketing instead. After graduating, she immediately moved to London to embark on a career in marketing. Aged 33, her career was developing. She was living in Brixton Hill. She was in a happy relationship and the promise of her life was only growing. On March the 3rd, 2021, Sarah had gone to visit her friend in South London. Her friend lived in the Clapham Junction area, so she stopped in at a Sainsbury's in Brixton Hill to buy a bottle of wine on her way. This was a strange time, right in the midst of the lockdowns, so it was nice to have some normality, if only briefly. At around 9 PM, Sarah headed home, walking around a big local park. Home was around 2.5 miles away and would take around 40 minutes. But Sarah was smart. She stuck to the brightly lit roads, not walking through the park itself, and she phoned her boyfriend for the first 15 minutes. She was also dressed in a bright green rain jacket, navy blue trousers with a white diamond pattern, turquoise and orange trainers and a white beanie hat. Sarah was hard to miss. Now again, this was during the lockdowns. In the UK, you were only meant to be out of your home for 1 hour, and you also weren't supposed to meet other people unless they were within your bubble. Whilst Sarah met with her friend outside, she was still on edge about the lockdown rules. Shortly after 9:30 p.m, her worst fear was realised. Sarah was flagged down by a policeman. He told her she was breaching the lockdown guidelines. She chatted to the officer on the pavement outside Poinders Court, pleading with him to let her go with a warning. But he wouldn't relent. He showed her his police warrant card before putting her in handcuffs. 2 witnesses watched as she was put into the back of an unmarked police car. The onlookers felt sorry for her. It seemed that she was arrested for simply being outside. But during that period, the UK was fed a lot of confusing messaging. Everything seemed to be against the rules. For us normal people, anyway. She'd probably broken the law, the onlookers assumed. Sarah wasn't someone who would ever just get into a car with a stranger. She, like most people, would have had the sense to run or scream or shout, a natural instinct. But when you're a law-abiding citizen who's under arrest, you don't really have a choice. And Sarah willingly complied. But when Sarah didn't come home the next day, her boyfriend sounded the alarm. The hunt for Sarah started almost immediately. The Metropolitan Police launched an official missing persons appeal for Sarah on the 6th of March. Posters were distributed across London and a media campaign was launched to find Sarah. The case was huge and her face was everywhere. There was still hope that Sarah might turn up alive and well. Police were combing through CCTV footage from the area. This included bus cameras and Ring doorbells. They had no real idea what they were looking for, but they knew they needed to start with the police car that had picked up Sarah shortly after 9:30 p.m. They found bus camera footage that showed Sarah getting into a white Vauxhall Astra, and by a stroke of luck it had captured an image sharp enough to reveal the number plate. Inquiries led them back to Enterprise, a hire car company in Dover. There, staff handed over details provided by the person who had hired it. This included a mobile phone number. Detectives ran this number through their databases, and to their absolute shock, this phone number had been registered by a serving police officer, a man named Wayne Cousins. Wayne Cousins was a normal family man with a wife and 2 children. He was born in 1972 in Kent. He was serving with the Metropolitan Police as a police constable and firearms officer. He had joined the Met in September 2018 and in February 2020 was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection, or PADP branch, the division responsible for uniform protection of government and diplomatic premises. Was it possible that a serving officer could actually be responsible for Sarah's disappearance? The investigation gathered some steam. They slowly pieced together Cousins' movements after he picked Sarah up. He had left London completely, and by 1 a.m. on the 4th of March, he was in the Tilmanstone area of Kent 4 hours after plucking Sarah off of the street. Several hours later at 8:30 a.m, he returned the hire car. While the investigation into Everard's disappearance gathered pace, Wayne Cousins started to unravel. On the 5th of March, he reported to work that he was suffering from stress. On the same day at 2 p.m, he was captured by CCTV at a B&Q DIY store in Dover buying 2 green builder's bags for $9.94. On the 6th of March, he emailed his supervisor at the Met Police to declare that he no longer wanted to carry a firearm. The same day, he ordered a 2x2 meter tarpaulin, along with a bungee cargo net from Amazon. On the 8th of March, the day he was due back on duty, he declared to his supervisors that he was too sick to work. By Tuesday the 9th of March, detectives had enough to move in. At 7:50 p.m, Cousins was arrested at his home in Deal, Kent. Because of the hope that Sarah may still be alive, an emergency interview was authorised. This meant there was no need for a solicitor to be present. Arresting officers recorded the bizarre interview of Cousins in his own home on their body cameras.
So we're here to talk to you about Sarah. I'm going to show you a picture. Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Sarah went missing. I'll show you some pictures of her on the day.
Okay.
Sarah went missing on Wednesday. And her parents, obviously, and her family are really worried about her now. The inquiry that's been conducted so far has led us to come and speak to you about it and to see what we know about Sarah, okay? So, would you like to, do you know where Sarah is?
No.
Right, okay. Do you know anything about what happened to her?
I know that she went missing up in London somewhere, about a week ago or so, just from what I got on the news.
Okay. Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, no.
Have you had any interactions with her at all?
Why would I have personal interactions with her?
Well, it's very difficult because I can't go into a lot of the evidence because obviously that's not part of what an urgent interview is, okay? This interview is just about trying to find her. Because she's been missing for a while now.
I'm sat in handcuffs and I know her, so you must have something to say that I know her.
Well, as I said, you've been arrested on suspicion of kidnap, and we believe that you've been involved in her disappearance and taking her away from her family.
Okay.
So we are trying to find her. Obviously, everybody is very worried about her. She's got, parents. She's got, she's got siblings. She's got a boyfriend. There's a lot of people that care about her.
Sure.
You've seen her on the news, the number of people that are reaching out about her.
Sure.
Out there looking for her every day, and she's missing. And our primary job here is to find her and to try and find her safe and well.
Okay.
Now, we believe that you know something about where she is, and that's why we're here to look for her and to try and find her. And that's why we're talking to you now, is to try and get you to have a good think about it and tell us anything you can about where we might be able to find her.
Okay. Well, I am in financial, and I've been lent on by I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever, and they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. So I said, not happening, and it then came through that they're going to harm my family, take them away, and they'll use them instead. At that point I had no option to try and find somebody. So I don't, there's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know. This group of people.
Tell me about them. I need to find them. Tell me everything you know that
Okay.
that you'll help me.
There was a white Sprinter van. They was between sort of Lenham, Maidstone area that I dropped her off. I still don't know. I don't know. They just I just parked my car up, and then the van come up behind me, flashed me. They all jumped out, and then they took this girl. They said, you've done good, and I don't know whether my family's going to be alright still. But they threatened to take my family away from me. So at that point, I'm doing what I can to protect my family. That's it. So all I know is that it was a roundabout. We could drive there now. I could show you. But roughly, I don't know Lenham, Maidstone area at all.
If we did it on Google, if we did it on Google Maps, like Google Earth, if we drove it, would you
Right.
be able to do it?
I drove from Ashford to Maidstone.
Yeah.
there's a roundabout that breaks up, I guess. So this is the first big roundabout you come to. And you would carry straight over to Maidstone, but instead I went round that roundabout and back up another road. And at that point, I was flashed and pulled over. You guys got out, opened my door, opened that door, pushed me out against the front of the car, took the girl, drove off. That's it. They said, we'll be in touch. So I'm here, I'm off work with stress because I'm here to protect my family. I want to be here 24/7 for my family. They come from my family. I've got nothing myself. I've got no choice.
I'll go back through the route with you in a minute, alright? But how do they contact you? How did you contact them?
I tried to take over on one of their call girls and rip her off. So she's told them, and they've got me. So
How do they? No, but what I mean is, how do they contact you? How is it they've been in contact with you to make these threats?
they just tell me, be here. So Hotel Burston down in Folkestone, got to be here. Okay, so I turned up. I've got no mobile number, and they have got my mobile number.
They haven't.
They're obviously outside watching, following. I just, honestly,
How are they telling you to be there? How is it they're giving those directions?
yeah, they'll come outside. So they'll be outside here,
Yeah.
and then they'll say, right, you're going to be in Folkestone at this time, or you're going to be in Ashford at this time. That's it. There's no links, no telephone numbers. I'm completely on my own, but at the same time being threatened. It had Romanian plates on the van, white, like Mercedes Sprinter type van.
Cousins described the location and gave a description of the men, but no one was buying it. Instead, the police were more interested in a plot of land he and his wife had purchased in 2019. It was a small plot of woodland off of Frid Lane in Ashford. Phone data also sparked police interest in that small area. Intensive searches began, and just before 5 p.m. on the 10th of March, a body was discovered, approximately 100 metres away from the area owned by Cousins. The body of Sarah Everard was found in a large green builder's bag, similar to the one Cousins had bought days earlier and left dumped in a stream. Sarah was identified by her dental records. Her promising life had been ended by strangulation. On that same day, Wayne Cousins was rearrested on suspicion of murder. A day later, he was hospitalised following a head injury sustained in custody. He was again briefly hospitalised the following day after another similar injury. Police said that these injuries were self-inflicted. Whilst he continued to try to escape justice, police pieced together Sarah's final hours. On March the 3rd, Wayne told his family he would be out working late. Then he drove to London, bought some essential things and started prowling the streets. He was deliberately looking for a woman on her own, someone he could trap. And there was Sarah walking by the park. She was doing everything right to stay safe, but she had no idea how much danger she was in. Wayne pulled up beside her and convinced her that she was being legally arrested. He put handcuffs on her and drove her towards what she thought was a police station. Instead, he drove for 80 more miles before transferring her to his own car at 11:43 a.m. By then, she must have been terrified, but she was completely unable to save herself, trapped in handcuffs. Not long after this, he throttled her, ending her life with his police uniform belt. He then stashed Sarah's remains in a fridge on the woodland that he owned. On March the 5th, he bought some gasoline in a can and tried to use it to dispose of her entirely, leaving the remains in the pond nearby. He thought he could get away with it and carry on with his life forever, but alas, he was charged with Sarah's kidnapping and murder on the 12th of March. On the 8th of July 2021, Wayne Cousins was now the one that was cuffed, scared and trapped against his will. he went on trial. He pleaded guilty to kidnap and intimate violations, and he admitted responsibility for Sarah Everard's death. The trial was highly publicised in the UK at the time. Sarah's death had called for an investigation into the Metropolitan Police, and the Met didn't do themselves any favours in the weeks after the case was closed. They were forcibly, arguably violently breaking up visuals to commemorate Sarah. Visuals that were mainly large groups of women. As the UK came to terms with the idea of a serving police officer brutally ending an innocent woman, the images of policemen manhandling peaceful protesters were not welcomed. They also came under fire for their failure to prevent this murder. Not only did police not take any action after an alleged incident of indecent exposure from Cousins in 2015, but he also faced at least 2 accusations of indecent exposure that had not been properly investigated earlier in 2021. Had these incidents been investigated properly by the Met at the time, Sarah may still be alive today. Sarah's mother said in her impact statement, she lost her life because Wayne Cousins wanted to satisfy his perverted desires. How could he value a human life so cheaply? He treated my daughter as if she was nothing, and disposed of her as if she was rubbish. The judge agreed, calling what he did warped, selfish and brutal. The judge added in court that Wayne had only shown self-pity and attempted to avoid or minimize the proper consequences of what he had done. Because of this, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was given a whole life order, meaning he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars with no opportunity for parole. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel. So make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you